intelligencesquared.com.
And our final speaker in these opening statements is Dr. Bernard Kouchner, the French socialist politician. Until the end of last year, he was France's foreign minister in the government of the centre-right President Nicolas Sarkozy. During 9/11, he was serving in the French cabinet as health minister. Dr. Kouchner, please return.
Thank you very much. Just one remark before trying to answer to such a difficult, very difficult question. But you know where I'm seated. I'm in favor of the right to interfere, the right to intervene, to avoid mass killings through prevention, this is now called the responsibility to protect, and through the UN system. I have devoted my life to that purpose. It was already my idea when I created Doctors Without Borders at the beginning of the 70s. It was impossible, it was illegal to take care of a patient on the other side of a virtual line called a border. And sometimes, let me insist, it was necessary not to respect the law, to change the law. In case of extreme emergency, we must act in order to save one life the same way we would try to save thousands of them. At the same time, I'm strongly supportive of the only international organization entitled to decide on war and peace, the UN system. Last point, I know personally the countries where we are talking about. As a medical doctor, I spent many months, few years, working in Afghanistan and in Iraq. And I know, I try to know these people. So the war on terror, was it the right answer to 9/11? Honestly, this is difficult to say yes or no, completely separate. Yes, it was imperative to react to 9/11 by war. Are you asking for an ethical, a military, or a political judgment? Let me be blunt. Ethically, it was imperative for the US to react. Politically, the way the Bush administration did has not been a complete success. Militarily, neither, even if some progress, at long last, has been made in Iraq, and some progress, a lot of progress also in Afghanistan. 10 years after, what was the real goals? To defeat bin Laden and Al-Qaeda? Now he is dead. His organization may be weakened, but it survived and some say proliferates in Africa. But what was the goal to get rid of Saddam? And partly the Arab Spring is an answer. The world has changed. Was the war on terror used against terrorists, rightly used against terrorists, or against evil governments? Bin Laden was based in Afghanistan, where we had to hit. Saddam Hussein had no links with Al-Qaeda. The famous Security Council session on Iraq was based on a series of lies. No weapon of mass destruction was found in Iraq. My country, France, was partly right, even if we were, according to my opinion, a bit too much supportive of Saddam Hussein. I remember the horrified moment of 9/11. We, our American friends and their allies, we had to respond and to fight back, but not only by force. We should also insist and act on developing economically these countries which harbored terrorist organizations. Easy to say, ladies and gentlemen, easy to say. But I insist, making war on terror is useless as long as also we don't address the issue of poverty and illiteracy. And I'm not so far, President Musharraf said. We should have been a war, it should have been also a war against poverty. Poverty is the main word in Afghanistan and also in Pakistan, not the same way. But a war against poverty more than against religious extremism. Was it the case? Not enough if we consider the result in Afghanistan. But another time, it's easy to say. What was Washington supposed to do after 9/11? Ask the International Criminal Court in La Hague to follow suit and wait for 10 years? Send the Peace Corps? Ask their allies by referendum, war or not war? I repeat, our friends, US friends and their allies wanted to punish bin Laden, hosted by the Afghan Taliban government. They were right. Less than 1 month after 9/11, fighting started on the ground and in the air. Unfortunately, bin Laden escaped mysteriously from the area of Tora Bora. In chasing bin Laden, Western leaders discovered a reality that only those remembering the Soviet war knew. Afghanistan, this is elementary, but we discovered that another time. Afghanistan is a patchwork of tribes, starting with the Pashtun, more or less close to the Taliban, and more or less linked to bin Laden. Not all of them, I know, but the large majority of the Taliban are Pashtun. The Pashtun lives on both sides of two countries. There are no border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. A village starts on one side, the road or the track continues in Afghanistan. There is no partition, no border, but a theoretical Durand line named after the British general. The Pashtun move freely. So should we have to make war on Pakistan? Impossible. Two good reasons. The Pakistanis are supposed to be our allies, and they have atomic weapons. Don't forget that. Have we been confronted? I don't know what exactly they applaud. Don't forget that. Have we been confronted to the two countries in a similar way? To AFPAC, as my very close and regretted friend, Ambassador Richard Holbrooke said, no. And I disagreed with this formulation. Have we been manipulated by Pakistan, like the Afghans themselves, in name of the superior interest, the obsession of a confrontation with India? And what about the role of Iran, financing sometimes the Taliban, sometimes the government of Kabul? Not easy, my friends. To all these questions, none to these days has a real answer. There is only one certainty. The US and its allies cannot win this war militarily. Only militarily. Our public opinion will not tolerate for long to see coffins coming back home for no clear purpose. And there is also one fact. Bin Laden is dead, and he was killed in Pakistan. Was a better answer possible? Prevention is always better than a cure. In the 80s, some NGOs tried to help those Afghans fighting the Soviet army. I was there. I was involved for years as a medical doctor. I believed then that we were on the right track. helping the people, mainly women and children. Meanwhile, our American friends were financing and training the Taliban with the help of Pakistan. Not easy. The question is there a good method to help the Afghans get rid of feudalism, set up a kind of democracy, or should we leave them alone? I agree with President Musharraf. We can't live like that. But the way to live is also not easy to define. Let me now come too briefly, this is the end, to Iraq. We must absolutely, and Jeremy was very good on that, make the distinction in between the so-called war on terror and the war in Iraq. The Bush administration deceived the Americans and their allies by using 9/11 as a pretext to punish Saddam Hussein. Was Saddam a respectable leader? Certainly not. He was a dictator and the butcher of his own people. I've also been a medical doctor in the mountains of Iraq with my friends, the democratic Kurds. I saw with my eyes and my hands full of blood the famous Operation Anfal, a project of genocide against the Kurds. I saw Shiite suffocating, and killed in the marshlands. In February 2003, I wrote an article in Le Monde. It was a big noise in France. No to Saddam, no to the war. I was just out of Kosovo. I suggest the same kind of international actions through the UN system. With my friend Jeremy Greenstock, we wanted to get rid of Saddam. But I knew that he was not guilty of the 9/11 and that did not have weapons of mass destruction. So the real issues, in conclusion, today, 10 years after 9/11, are the people of Afghanistan and the people of Iraq any better off? Yes, in a way. Schools, education, hospital, roads, etc. In fact, we have all been looking for those moderate Muslim, Sunni, or Shiites who would have been ready to fight for a sort of democracy. We looked at the wrong generation. I believe, and this is part of the answer, resides in the hopes of the Arab Spring and the young Arab leaders. Thank you very much.